Yesterday, of course, the president did go back on a campaign promise that he made throughout 2016, where he said he wouldn't touch Medicare, wouldn't touch Social Security. Yesterday, he said he would be open to cutting Social Security and Medicare. Talk about, since you've followed him around the campaign trail, how much of a reversal that is from 2016, and what may have moved him to say that yesterday.
It would be a complete reversal, and it's certainly an odd election year promise to suggest to go after entitlements. This 2015-2016, he separated himself from the Republican field by saying this was something he was going to protect, that he wasn't going to do this. And that's why he never, as we discuss nearly every day, he's never really been a traditional Republican. And there were some areas here, this was some crossover appeal to independents and maybe even some disaffected Democrats. I mean, this blindsided advisors yesterday, and there's not really a sense necessarily of how true this will be. It could have been the president just sort of riffing in an interview, as you say. Sometimes he seems to sort of talk just to fill the space. But it's something that obviously now we will see if the White House has to kind of engineer a plan like we have in the past when the president has made some sort of pronouncement and then the White House has needed to sort of take it forward, or whether this is something that will come and go like just another news cycle, right. Jim.
I think the trigger was he's meeting in Davos with all these CEOs. I think one of the topics that keeps coming up internally and when he's talking to conservatives is how can we as conservatives keep justifying the deficits that we have? If we keep running annual deficits above $1 trillion, which in him triggers, well, I'm not going to cut defense. And the big daddy out there is Social Security and Medicare. And he's not going to do it this year. I don't think they would do it next year if he were to win re-election. And so I think that's why people don't take it that seriously, because people just assume he's throwing it out there and won't act on it. He doesn't even really want to act on doing much on Obamacare right now. We have a piece up this morning where he could do what he's done in previous arguments with the court and say, let's expedite this. Let's see if we really can repeal Obamacare, the ACA. And they're saying, no, let's slow track this because they understand. They look at the results in that midterm election last time around. Democrats won not necessarily because of him. They won because of health care. And there's deep concern that if you start to get rid of protections for pre-existing conditions and things that are popular with a large section of our population, that it could backfire.
Well, and it shows you the degree to which the president just isn't taken seriously anymore. The president can say anything he wants, and as Mike said, well, we don't hold him accountable because we don't really take him that seriously. We don't assume that it means anything, but of course, as you pointed out, now somebody in the staff is going to have to reverse engineer this and somehow come up with this. You know, it's interesting. The president said, I don't want Bolton talking because he knows my thoughts. We all know his thoughts. He broadcasts them in random order. He has no inner monologue, so he puts them out there every day. Some of them matter, some of them don't. Some of them will eventually become something like policy, and the rest of them kind of go off into the ether, and we ignore them.
You know, I hate to give Lemire credit for anything.
No, but this will be the first.
But the phrase, he talks to fill the space, is perfectly appropriate for him, and he does it multiple times a day with no consequences. Again, we have all the information. They don't have information. I'd be willing to cut Medicare, and we just move on and on and on.
I'm going to bask in that compliment for a second, Mike. But yes, I mean, this is what he often does. An advisor once told me that he's not interested in necessarily winning the news cycle, the news day. He wants to just win that moment.
Sure.
He just needs to say something to win that particular exchange with a reporter in this case, and that he will sometimes say things that will leave those in the White House shaking their heads, being like, okay, now we have to go back to the drawing boards and start over.
His tell always, Mika, is when he ends, or Joe, and says, we'll take a look at that. He's asked a question about something he doesn't maybe understand or doesn't have the answer. He said, we're looking at that very strongly. We'll tell you about that in 2 weeks. He knows there's so much information out there, this fire hose that will dissipate over time. Right. We'll see what happens.
Right. Oh, we'll see what happens.
You know, the thing is, though, just following up on what Mike said, and I think what Tom said, nobody ever pays for it. He never pays for it. Well, he does. We've had 2 polls out this week where a majority of Americans say he deserves to be removed from office. He should be removed from office. The Pew poll shows that 63% of Americans under the age of 30 want him removed from office. The majority of white educated voters want Donald Trump removed from office, believe he deserves to be removed from office. 58% of Americans believe he abused the powers of his office. He abused the presidency and needs to be removed from office. 51% of those say that. Almost 7 in 10 Americans say they need to see more witnesses. Again, showing that everybody that came out before saying, oh, we don't need any more witnesses, are on the wrong side of history. Donald Trump is paying for all of this. Alex, really quickly, I know we got to go to break, but show the matchups again, the head-to-head matchup with Democrats. And I've been hearing Trump apologists online, on Twitter, on TV now for months saying that impeachment was going to be a disaster for Democratic candidates and it was going to be wonderful for Donald Trump. Well, look at these numbers that Trump apologists call wonderful. Joe Biden is breezing past Donald Trump, 53 to 44%. Michael Bloomberg, he just got in the race.
Oh, my gosh.
What, a month or two ago? He's ahead of Donald Trump by 9 points. Little Mike, no, Donald, actually looking pretty big because you're in his shadow right now by 9 points. Bernie Sanders, the avowed socialist, beating Donald Trump by 7%. Elizabeth Warren, the woman called Pocahontas and mocked and ridiculed repeatedly by Donald Trump, beating Donald Trump by 5 points. So, Willie, you know, this does have an impact. The 16,000 lies or 13,000 lies have an impact. His lies about the, quote, perfect call have an impact. Nobody thinks it's a perfect call. Most Americans believe he abused his office. Most Americans believe he obstructed justice. Most Americans believe he obstructed this investigation. And most Americans think he needs to be impeached and removed. That's not getting away with anything, Willie. And we're not even talking about the historic landslide that Democrats won in 2018.
It's another signal, that poll that you had, the head-to-head, that Americans don't like what they've seen, the evidence they've heard in this impeachment trial, and that they want the trial to be fair. They want it to be heard out. They don't like the fact that Republicans came out beforehand, led by Mitch McConnell, and said, we've made up our minds. The president will be acquitted. They want a fair trial. People can smell something bad. They know what they smell. And they hear this Ukraine story is laid out from start to finish by Adam Schiff yesterday, and they know it doesn't smell good. I will say, those are interesting general election head-to-head matchup polls nationally. But as Jonathan said earlier, those states that are going to decide the election are airtight. And I don't think there's anybody this time around, they learned their lesson 4 years ago, that thinks they're going to breeze past Donald Trump at all, given the kind of fighter he is. So we will see. Coming up next on Morning Joe, we'll talk to one of the House impeachment prosecutors who's helping make the case for President Trump's removal from office. Congressman Jason Crow will be our guest ahead on Morning Joe. Plus, more reporting from Garrett Haake and legal analysis from Barbara McQuaid when Morning Joe comes right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.